Greetings. My name is Mr. Sifiso Mahlaba from the Northwest University Mafikeng campus, the Faculty of Education, and I'm a lecturer for mathematics education. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the art of being a reflective practitioner. So, meaning we will be talking about the importance of reflecting in your practice and on your practice as you are learning to become a teacher in the University of Northwest. Right. So we need to first start at the general part. In this case, we'll be starting with looking at the reflection at your early days of schooling, and we will be looking at what I'd like to call conscious and unconscious reflection, where we will be looking at the reflection that you do consciously and the reflection that you do unconsciously. So think about an example. For example, when we are still young, you would know automatically that when you put your finger in a lighter, you will get pain. That's unconscious reflection. That's like memory reflection. It's the brain that does that for you. It's the reflection that comes from the brain. It's unconscious. You don't have to sit down and sit and think about what you are doing when you are doing that kind of reflection. So that is what we call unconscious reflection or unconscious repetition, because it's mainly brain muscle. Right. And then if we look at another different example of reflection that you have done before, is looking at your corrections that you were doing in school. When you were doing corrections in schools, that was part of reflection. What were you doing? You were looking at a different way of approaching a certain situation. It doesn't matter what a subject it was, but you were looking at a different way of approaching a particular subject. If you are given in math, if you are given in a sum, and you got your answer as 5, but others got their answer as 8. Now you look back, you are looking back and saying, okay, what did I do wrong in this and how can I improve from there? So that's also, when you were doing corrections in school, that was also part of you reflecting in your practice that you have done before, right? So as teachers and as other, university qualification that you will get, you come up with, in university, you will come out with 2 types of qualifications. The first type is your academic qualification, and your second type is a professional qualification. And I want to just make a difference between the two. So if you possess an academic qualification, it means you have a grasp of the theory or in that qualification. For example, if we look at BSc, in BSc, you only learn the theory. There's no practical application that is done in BSc. There's no in-service training that is done in BSc. It's only the theory part. So if we have an academic qualification, it means you have the theory of the subjects. You have learned the theory. It also satisfies that an individual has learned the theory behind the practice. So you don't necessarily have to know the practice, but you know the theory behind it. That's an academic qualification. And an academic qualification is only decided by the university. No one else can tell the university to award or not award the qualification, because it's only governed by the university. However, a professional qualification has 2 components in it. It focuses on theory and it also focuses on practice. And as teachers, we are going to be doing the theory. For example, we are measuring in mathematics, and please forgive me if I make too much examples about mathematics. But you will be measuring in mathematics, so you'll be doing the theory of mathematics, which is the content, but you'll also be engaging in the training part or the practical part. So you will also be training into being mathematics teachers. You will be doing for example, planning a lesson. That's what's going to be happening in class. You will be engaging in micro lessons. You will be going on teaching practice and all those things. That's the practical part. So you in professional qualification, you have to learn the theory plus the practical part. And this qualification certifies competence. And it certifies competence and expertise in completing the required duties. So if you have an academic qualification, it means you are competent enough to complete your required duties. However, if you have an academic qualification, we know that we know that you know the theory behind a certain aspect of working, but we are not sure whether you can actually complete certain things concerning that part of a work. Right, and also the last thing about a professional qualification is it requires a registration with a professional body. So you will know that as a teacher, once you graduate, you need to then register with the South African Council of Educators, which is SACE. That then automatically means that you are now a professional teacher. So a simple example is a person who finishes a 3-year degree in becoming an accountant. That person has an academic qualification. So once you are done with your university 3 years, you graduate with BCom accounting, you have a university degree, or you have an academic qualification. However, if this person now decides to enroll with a SAICA, for example, now they are becoming a chartered accountant. So they are enrolling with SAICA. You see now the accrediting body is no longer just the university only, but now the accrediting body is also a professional body, which is SAICA. Therefore, that person will then graduate as a chartered accountant, and therefore that person will have what we call a professional qualification. So his qualification will then be transformed from being an academic qualification to a professional qualification. Okay, why am I doing this? Why am I differentiating between the two? Because the other one, it just focuses only on theory, and the other one focuses at the practical part. And as teachers, you are going to be having a practical component in your degree. So you need to know and understand how to reflect. And that practical part, it forces you, it includes a lot of reflection in your practice, on your practice, looking at what you did and whether it worked or it didn't work. Right, let's go on looking at what is a reflection. If we can simply say reflection is just looking back. You are just looking back at what you did, and you are just asking yourself, how can you do that better? That's a simple and in layman's terms definition to say this is reflection. You're looking back and you are seeing how you can improve whatever practice that you engaged in. Right, but there are literature definitions of reflection. For example, Dewey suggests that a reflection or thinking reflectively means an active, persistent, and very careful consideration of a belief or some knowledge based on what supports that knowledge and what conclusions come up from that knowledge. There are other definitions from Moon, there are definitions from Scone, but the most important thing that I think these definitions convey basically is the fact that reflection is a careful process. You don't just reflect without sitting down and looking at certain things, certain aspects of a certain activity, and doing that with a conscious mind to say, how can I improve, or what could I have done different from what I've done here, right? We can look at two types of reflection. You can reflect in practice, and you can also reflect on practice. When you're reflecting in practice, it means you are reflecting immediately during what is happening there. So for example, of reflection in practice, you might be in class and a certain student is asking you something and you don't know that thing automatically or at that stage. So you will have to then look at your past experiences and see how you can handle that question without being embarrassed in the class, or without even admitting that, I don't know the the answer at that time. Right, and when you reflect on practice, it's the most conscious one, because now you have to sit down and look at a certain practice that you have done before, and then after that work with what you can do to improve that practice. That's reflecting on practice. So these two types of reflection can happen consciously, and sometimes when you're reflecting in practice, it's something that happens unconsciously, but most of the times it's what we call conscious reflection. Right, and now I want to differentiate between an expert and a reflective practitioner, and I want us to relate this to what I was talking about earlier, which is the difference between an academic and a professional qualification. Someone with an academic qualification might regard themselves as an expert, and someone with a professional qualification more of a reflective practitioner, because their work is not as if you have a professional qualification, your work is immersed in people. You are working with people, so situations always change, and you have to try and work with the change in that situation, during that situation, and looking at different things that you have done in the past. So for example, an expert feels that they are presumed to know. The knowledge is within them. They are presumed to know, and they must claim to do so regardless of whether there is uncertainty or there is certainty in what they are saying. They are presumed to know. So in other words, in terms of knowledge, they are up there. They are the ones who have the knowledge. However, a reflective practitioner is different. A reflective practitioner knows that they know the business, but they also consider other people's ideas, because for them to improve in what they are doing, they need to understand different situations and how people deal with those situations. And therefore, they will then have to work all those people's ideas together, and then they will come up with a better solution for future practice. So that's a reflective practitioner. Another example or another difference between an expert and a reflective practitioner will be that an expert will think that their role is detached from the client. They need to do this. They need to do A, B, and C for the client. They don't consider whether the client likes that or not. They just use their expertise and they use their knowledge that they gain to build a certain solution for a client, and they don't care. They don't mind whether the client likes it or not. However, a reflective practitioner says it is a person who makes proposal. In this case, will make a proposal to the client and say, okay, based on my expertise, based on what I know about this business, I propose that you do A, B, C, and D. And then the other person or the client will then come and say, okay, I understand that, but what about this and this and this? You see, now we are working with people's ideas to build a better outcome for them. So you are also including other people's ideas, and you are reflecting on them critically. So you are not just taking what they are saying, but you are also looking at different things, different aspects of what they're saying, and also you try and make a better solution in that regard, right? And the last part will be an expert will always look for difference in opinions, which might be a threat to his or her expertise. So these people are, since they presume to know, or they think they know everything, if there is a difference in opinions, then it will be like we are questioning their knowledge. So they don't want that, and they try by all means to prove that what they are saying is true, instead of trying to reason with you and also reason with the different approach that you are looking at, which is what a reflective practitioner will do. A reflective practitioner will then look for the sense of freedom and real connection. So they don't want to act like they are outsiders or they are the main bearers of knowledge. They want to have a connection, have a conversation, and see from different point of views. Right, so we need to look as well at how does a reflection occur. A reflection, as we saw from the definition, reflection is a very carefully planned process. So there are different models that have been developed from research about reflection, and those models have been used in different fields, business, in education, and other fields. But for time purposes, here I'm just going to look at one model, and we can then discuss that model and how just to show you how reflection occurs, right? So I am using Atkins and Murphy's model from their literature review there. They say the first step when you're about to reflect is you need to be aware of an uncomfortable feeling and thought. So what does that mean in simple terms? So the awareness of uncomfortable feeling and thought means when you are seated somewhere, you start thinking about a certain activity, it makes you feel uncomfortable, or you think maybe you can do better, or you have the inside desire to do better. So now that makes you uncomfortable, because then it means you didn't do what you were supposed to do properly, and you have to redo that again, or you have to improve from that again. So you are now aware of the problem. In other words, you can identify the problem and you are aware of it. Now, what are you doing now? You are now critically analyzing your feelings and your knowledge. That's the second step. So in other words, here is my problem. Now I'm looking at how I felt and what knowledge do I have. Why are you doing that? If this uncomfortable feeling is really making you uncomfortable, then you need to gain proper knowledge and you need to gain proper skills, and you need to look at different approaches that can actually improve that uncomfortable situation that you have experienced in the past, because you wouldn't want to experience that in the future. A simple example, a simple classroom example will be if you enter a certain classroom and maybe you have a quarrel with one of the students, and it ends up, having to involve parents and all. That's an uncomfortable situation, because in the future when you get into the classroom, you still have that learner, and you might not be able to look at that student in the same way. So you need to sit down and find ways of dealing with that situation in such a way that it doesn't make you feel uncomfortable anymore. And then the last step is, once we are aware of the uncomfortable feeling and thoughts, and once you have critically analyzed that feeling and also your knowledge, then you can now come with a new perspective on that situation to say, well, in the future I will then work with A, B, C, and D. That's just one model of reflection. There are other longer models, there are other models that are geared towards education, but I feel that this one kind of, it encompasses many other fields, because it's not being specific to teaching and learning or to the education field, right? And then let's look at why it is important now to reflect. If you engage in reflective practice, of course, we can read from research that there's a lot of benefits there, right? For example, it may improve relationships among teachers and learners, and it also improves teaching quality. How does it do that? Because once you know how your learners feel when you talk to them, then in the future you can always improve the way you talk to your students. Sometimes you might find that something is offending to the students, and if you don't reflect on that, if you don't ask the students, if you don't talk to the students, then you will see that you will continue offending the students without even you knowing that you are offending the student. So if you reflect on everything that you do inside the classroom, it can improve your relationship with your students, and it can also improve the quality of your teaching. Right, reflection also is an integral part of planning your lessons. You need to reflect in your practice on how you did things in your class in order to plan proper lessons in the future. So you need to work very well with the reflection and also with your students. You need students are going to tell you exactly, and you are the one who needs to put that, that's reflective climate in the classroom. You need your students to be clean with you, and you also need to critically analyze your methods that you use in the classroom in order to make sure that your planning for your future planning is actually better and you work much better with your students. Also, if you work with a very reflective classroom and you've cultivated and you have cultured the classroom into reflecting, this can actually, enrich one's problem-solving repertoire, because whenever you reflect, you don't only have to reflect if something went bad. You have to reflect even though there were good things, but we also have to reflect and look at different approaches of how are you going to solve this in the future. If you didn't have this, what were you going to do? Now you start working with different approaches. So even if everything worked very well and you are satisfied and you don't have any uncomfortable feeling, you can still reflect by looking at different approaches, and you can also look at different ways of solving a particular problem. So if you reflect, you can also gain, a much higher problem-solving repertoire, which means you will have much more success in solving problems in the future. right? Reflection can also foster deeper understanding of context and practice. Again, you might find that a certain student is acting in a particular way because of their context, because of their background, because of a certain thing that happens at home. And once you reflect on what's happening with, for example, a particular student, or what's happening in a particular society, if there's crime, if there's things like, teenage pregnancy and any other things that are involved within that society where the student comes from. Once you reflect on that, you can actually have a deeper understanding of why a particular student or why particular students are acting in a certain way. And also that can improve your practice in the classroom and how you look at the students. Right. In addition, reflection also kindles many other skills that are considered to be important in the 21st century. For example, your metacognition, your self-directed learning, planning, communication, collaboration. Reflection is a skill that goes hand in hand with the development of a lot of other skills just in person. And those skills can be used in your teaching and learning practice, right? And also, reflection is an integral part of education for a person engaged with a professional career. If you have a professional career, you must always work with reflection. And you as teachers means you need to start working on reflection as early as you start opening your books. Right, what is your role then? Your role is, as a growing professional, you need to start developing the skills of reflecting in and on practice. You need to start learning skills of facilitating a reflective practice in your classroom. So you need to start making sure that, if I reflect like this, how am I going to make sure that my students also do the same thing when I do my teaching? And once you gain those two skills, then you'll be able to, if you can reflect yourself and you can cultivate a culture of reflection in your classroom, then you can easily be able to facilitate teaching and learning that involves a lot of reflection. Right, this is another cycle of reflection, reflecting on your learning. But this is a longer model. For example, you have to find a description of what happened. How did that make you feel? Evaluate, was it good or bad? And if it was good, what was good, what was bad, and how are you going to look at these things? So you start analyzing and you start making conclusion, and then you develop a certain action plan to say, okay, in the future, this is what I'm going to be doing. All right. Okay, I hope this was very useful, and thank you very much.